So my name is Florentina Niculescu. I'm somatic experiencing practitioner, clinical psychologist, and integrative psychotherapist. I'm specialized in working with trauma and abusive relationship, domestic violence, and physical and sexual abuse. I'm also the founder of Asociația Pași Către Tine, a local ONG that aims to support those who seek psychological assistance. And by bringing somatic experiencing training course for specialists in order to understand the problems related to post-traumatic stress, we promote a new approach to healing trauma and increasing the resilience. Today, I'm thrilled to have that you watch this interview with a great person. I had the luck to know her. Her name is Gina Rose, and she is the president. And I have a lot of emotion because I'm sitting here with the president, founder of International Trauma Healing Institute, and she developed also EmotionAid. Gina is an international CE, somatic experiencing senior trainer. Add her vast cross-cultural experience to her expertise on individual and collective trauma and conflict resolution. She has conducted workshops during all over the world, Europe, Brazil, Africa, America, and also Middle East. She authored Behind the Trauma Vortex, the media roles in healing fear, terror, and violence, and a series of 7 guidebooks for social sectors called Behind the Trauma Vortex into the Healing Vortex guidelines. She specializes in trauma therapy and cross-cultural therapy. And she's here with us to share of her experience in working with trauma. Exactly how memory of past dictates the experience of the present. Gina, thank you so much for being here with us. I appreciate a lot your work, and I know that people from Romania, they will be glad to hear from you how this collective trauma affect us.
Well, thank you for inviting me. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I would say that collective trauma actually impacts us in the same way that individual trauma does. Except that this time, instead of having one person or a little family, we have a whole community and sometimes a whole nation. And right now, with COVID, maybe the whole world or a big part of the world that are impacted by trauma, by what's happening to people. So maybe the first thing to do is to talk about what trauma is very simply. Mm-hmm. That it is a sense of loss of control and being overwhelmed by things. And at that point, our functioning gets affected. How we operate as an individual or how we operate as a society get impacted because of that, mm-hmm. because of the trauma. So, yeah. It really affects our functioning. Mm-hmm. And when I mean that functioning, I'm talking about how we think, how we're feeling, and how we're acting in the world. And also our physical health gets affected tremendously.
Yeah.
And at the collective level, what you would see is that the infrastructure and the institutions are not very strong or are not functioning very well, or there's corruption or incompetence. This is how it will develop there. And when there is conflict, then there's also the violence added to it.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So we have a very, very interesting and difficult topic, collective trauma. I have to tell you that for more than 20 years, our country has been ruled by the communist president. And in 1989, a revolution took place in Romania, as a result of which communism fell from power. In this context, yeah, from the perspective of collective trauma, why do you think, and also from your experience, why do you think it is important for people from Romania, yeah, to understand how the impact of our life affect us today?
Yeah, yeah, it's very interesting, actually, isn't it? Because what you have here, it's two different systems, right? So you have the communist system and you have the capitalistic system or the democratic system.
Yeah,
There's economical and political on
yeah,
both sides, and that's where the differences are. So on one hand, democracy-wise, communism really shattered and broke people's autonomy and independence and the capacity to do what they want, and was very controlling of people's lives. And economically, there were no wealth, but people were very secure. Everything was done for them. Everything was indicated, was secured. Even education. I mean, I remember people going from Russia to Israel, and they all were educated, highly educated. So there's that aspect. On the other hand, the other side, you gain autonomy and freedom and the capacity to operate the way you want and to become, entrepreneurial, to
yeah,
be able to start things on your own. There is a real sense of empowerment, but at the same time, everything has to come up by yourself. The
true.
state is not providing anymore, and that could take some of the safety away. So I would imagine that depending on where people were in the scale, whether it's the age or what they were doing or their education or what their education allowed them to do as a new work, they would have very different attachment to the two systems. And I
True.
can see where the generations could collide over that because of this. So there could be more conflict than if that didn't happen, if communism hadn't existed, or if communism hadn't fallen. There wouldn't be the same problem, generational conflict, I think, in the society. So that's another one. And of course, things like and this is the same for the pandemic too, for COVID-19, is that the sense of safety is very compromised right now for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think that what happens when we are in trauma, when we are traumatized individually or collectively, there's something that we have called the trauma vortex. The trauma vortex is like everything that I can do, I feel, or I know, or I think, or I act is distorted, is dysfunctional, is exaggerated, is overwhelming. I lose my power. This is what we call being in the trauma vortex. So really what trauma does, individually or collectively, is put people in a state of dysfunction, which is what I call the trauma vortex.
Yeah, thank you so much for explaining this also for the general public, because the students who are doing the training in somatic experiencing, they know the concept of traumatic vortex. But thank you so much for clarifying this aspect also for the.
But then let me talk though. Let me say this is that the trauma vortex doesn't come alone.
Okay.
It comes with it comes with the healing vortex. And that's the good news. That's the good news. And we can talk about that in a moment.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Please tell me, because I tell the people that you also are somatic experiencing trainer. How can we use the somatics tools in working with collective trauma?
Yeah, of course we can use somatic, but of course the therapist can use somatic experiencing for their clients. But we have something amazing that's called EmotionAid
Yeah,
that the public can use for themselves.
yeah.
And every therapist can teach that to their clients. And EmotionAid are tools based on somatic experiencing, but that you can apply on the spot, anytime, anywhere,
Yeah.
that you are under stress or with traumatic activation to self-regulate again. And the beauty about it, it's actually based on our inherent capacity, like we're born with it, our inherent capacity to regulate, which trauma has kind of blown it up, and we put it back together. We kind of make it available again.
Yeah, and as I know, you will teach this EmotionAid in your first day of training,
Yes,
and
yes.
after that, collective trauma.
It's
Yeah,
a wonderful tool.
it is.
Especially when there's collective trauma. It's like if you can have the same language to for a lot of people, it's been very easy to talk about it. And instead of making people being bad or horrible or negative, you just start understanding they're in the trauma vortex. And then you can take them into the healing vortex. And if you are in the healing vortex, if you train yourself to come from that place, then you are a very positive influence going out in the world, an energy that's walking around, creating healing instead of reacting to bad things.
It's so good to hear that the healing appears, and it's so good for me to hear you talking about EmotionAids, and you start with with the healing part, and after that you go into deep
Into the conflict,
yeah, yeah.
Because if let's say, for me to understand what's going on with you or with me, I have to be pretty much centered, right? So let's say I'm thinking and I'm reflecting and I'm listening to you, and then all of a sudden I get emotional. Well, all my thinking just disappeared.
Yeah.
So my emotional balance has to be there all the time if I want to be able to resolve conflict or to communicate with people or to understand myself or to understand the other. So we're using something called universal basic needs. The beauty about them is what we all have in common. So you can bring people who are enemies, adversaries, everything that you want in the same room. And then what they understand is they have the same nervous system and they have the same universal basic needs. So we start looking at everything through that angle of the basic needs, and it's a much healthier way to understand the other and try to communicate with the other because of that.
Yeah, it is very interesting, this concept, universal basic needs. Can you explain a little bit about how this pandemic affect our universal basic
Yeah.
needs?
Well, I'll take a couple of them. There are several of them. We don't have to cover all of them, but
Sure.
the pandemic, for example, is definitely affecting our sense of safety, for sure. It's affecting, when they put you in lockdown, it's affecting our sense of autonomy, of independence. It doesn't have to be if we agree with it, then we think it's for our good. But it has been so crazy everywhere that now there's a sense of autonomy is being really impacted. People are getting very upset about it. I would say, I don't know about the sense of competence. It depends. Like the people who have been able to work feel even more competent and feel extraordinarily useful and very special.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that had to stay at home, it would be the opposite. But you still can handle your life situation at home in a different way, like feeling competent about it instead of letting it dysregulate you. If we're dysregulated, everything is off. If we're regulated, this is where we now can do something really special. It's like maybe find new meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I had to stop my life how it was before. And there are a lot of different things that I can pay attention to now. Where am I? Who am I? Who am I with? What do I want? I call that the silver linings. So
Hmm.
we can get a lot of positive meaning out of it too. We can turn everything into gold if we're coming from the healing vortex, basically.
Yeah. Now
But
I
we need to know how to get out of it,
yeah.
how to get out of the trauma vortex. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I understand better the connection between universal basic needs and emotion ads.
Yes.
Thank you.
Throughout the whole thing, throughout the whole process that we do, we're constantly using the emotion aid.
Mhm.
Because if the emotions take over, we cannot do any of the thinking that will last for any period of time. It has to be based on a very strong emotional foundation.
Mhm.
So, throughout the process, the protocol that we have designed, we are interacting with emotion aid the whole time.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
a constant process. Yeah.
We have a very, very nice metaphor here. So if the base of the house is strong, the
Yes.
house will not,
It will stand.
yeah, yeah, it's
And you
true.
can keep building and you can keep building. You can go high and high and higher up. That's right. Good for you. I like
Gina, please, from your work experience, and I know that you have a lot of work, and I was there in your workshop. What impact do you think that the collective trauma has on development traumas?
yeah. So it works both ways actually, It's very interesting. But let's say if there's a collective trauma
Mm-hmm.
and then some of the basic needs of the people who are under this trauma are not being fulfilled,
Mm-hmm.
that's what they're going to pass on to the next generation. So
Yeah.
if I don't feel safe, if I'm suspicious, if I mistrust people or the world, if I don't feel free, then I don't see the possibilities. I don't take it for granted that I can do anything I want or that I have the capacity to do anything I want. So my competence, my safety, my sense of identity, my sense of autonomy,
Mm-hmm.
all of that is being affected. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I, as a parent, I'm not functioning well in those aspects, I'm not going to pass the right thing to my kids.
Yeah.
They will have to do the healing. There's something called epigenetic transmission of trauma that we pass on. But I do want to leave you with a good word here because we realize there's the epigenetic transmission of the healing vortex too.
It's true.
It doesn't have to be only of trauma. So, what the collective thought that I think what that brings us is to look at the collective. What are the emotions that are important for that collective, and how can they work with it? But again, to me, the collective is made of a lot of individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So the work has to be done at the individual level, and then it goes into society, into the nation, through the arts, through the media, through the structures, how the structures are being led, through the politics. So it's like you have to have the healing first, and then it's transmitted by individuals onto national structures. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the information that you will bring to us will help us to have a further generation more strong and healthy also.
To do the healing, yeah. Oh, it would be my pleasure to work with you.
Thank you
It's
so
really
much.
wonderful.
Thank you so much, Gina, for your explanations. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. See you next.
See you next. Bye.